Bible this morning, raise your hand. Our ushers will get you one. Here in a few moments, we'll get to John chapter 6. So you can, it's a New Testament, fourth gospel, the book of John. A guy named John wrote the book. I always love that part of the gospel. You know who wrote them because they're named after him. So Bibles, good? Man, you guys are on top of it today. We start a new series this morning that's going to take us through the 27th of April. And the series is Radical Jesus. Have you ever read through the Gospels and actually saw and read and heard some of the things that Jesus said? They're kind of radical. He was kind of a rebel. He kind of went against mainstream sometimes. And he definitely went against the religious elite, the religious leaders, and I think he did it just to irritate them. You know? We're going to look at some of those hard sayings of Jesus, particularly the hard sayings of Jesus where he calls you and he calls me to follow. If you look and read through the Gospels and you look and see what he was really asking us to do to follow him, it was radical. It was radical. And he did some pretty radical things. And so we're going to look at radical Jesus all the way through the Easter season and end with the 27th where he calls you and he calls me to bear the image of Christ in the world. And so I hope that you will be here through this next series. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you're challenged. That's the goal, is for us all to be challenged, to be a better follower, to be the best follower we can. This morning, though, I got to be honest. I don't really want to preach this message. Now, I've been the lead pastor now since August, and this is the first time I've felt this way. It's not really a message I want to preach, and I'll get to why, and I'll explain why. But I just come to you this morning being real honest and saying sometimes it has to do with things that we don't like to talk about. And I feel like we've been doing so good and there's been so many positive things going on. I really don't want to preach this message because I want to set us back. I want us to keep going. But if you remember back in November, I shared what our mission statement was with the church. I said to our church, I said, listen, we want to affect life change through belonging, growing, and serving. Belong, grow, and serve. And I talked about how often we're on this race and God's got us going a certain direction and sometimes there's hurdles. And when things are going good, when there seems to be peace, we put our guard down and bam, there's one of those hurdles, right? Well, I'm here to talk about one of those hurdles. That as a church, as a family, we've got to work together to get over. And so to be honest with you, I really don't want to preach this message. Because whenever we start talking about the things that we've got to talk about, it gets hard. Let me tell you just a little bit of what happened around this place this week. On Monday, I met with Skip Halverson's family to plan his memorial service. We'll have another meeting with them this week, but our church on the 22nd is going to be opened up to a lot of people because Skip had a mega influence on people. And we're going to have people who are going to walk through these doors for the very first time as we celebrate his life. Mary Alexander and her family were taken care of by so many of you. Particularly, I know Mark Pearson was working with Greg quite a bit and through Dave and Carol. And man, we were just trying to help as much as we could by being afar, you know? Benevolence team this week, or in the last month, has dispersed $776 to people who are in dire need. That really, lots of little disbursements that made a big difference. Just this past Friday, 16 of our 7th and 8th grade kids went down to the convention center for a Christ in Youth Believe conference with 5 of our most incredible middle school leaders. Yeah, they're good. They're all right. Our building hosted 5 addiction groups outside of what we already do on Friday nights. 5 addiction groups here throughout the week. In addition to that, 2 Girl Scout troops, a Leche League, hopefully I said that right, CPR training, and a school talent show. And that was just this week. This is using our building as a positive light to our community. In addition, our building hosted Bible studies for men and for women and for youth and for kids. We had an elders meeting where we sat down with Will Nockels and talked about an ordination service for him in April, where our church will ordain him into full-time ministry. I'm in conversation right now with Carrie Rambo, who's one of our missionaries in New Zealand. March marks her 10th year anniversary as a missionary. Church, you want to know the difference you're making in international students in New Zealand? It's incredible. It's incredible. Chinese students where the gospel's not allowed to be preached are going to New Zealand and connecting with Carrie Rambo, and she's teaching them about Jesus. It's incredible. I was sent a note this week. You heard Liz talk about Africa. Just this week, 28 students from the original class in Mission of Hope International's first school took the national exam for college in October. Listen, Mission of Hope International began with 50 students in one school in the year 2000 and has grown to nearly 11,700 students as in 19 schools as of January 1st. I've just recently heard it's 14,000 students. About 2,000 new students enrolled in that school in January 2014. Now, if you're a teacher and you were told you have 2,000 new students to deal with, what would you do? Noma, what would you have done? Retired, quit, left? Yeah. I mean, picture this. 89% of the 277 Class 8, 8th grade class in Mission of Hope School passed their exams to enter high school recently. The national average is 40 to 50%. We are talking slum kids. Slum kids. And 89% of the 277 passed it with flying colors. Church, I keep talking about how I believe our future is bright. I believe the things we're doing are worthwhile. I believe they're making a difference. And what I just shared with you, that's an average week. You should come around here when it's busy. Because when it's busy, it's really crazy. And why would I share this with you? The primary reason is because in November I shared that mission statement. I told you what I wanted us to do, that I wanted us to affect life change. I wanted us to make a difference in people's lives through belonging and growing and serving. And I also told you that there would be hurdles, and there's a hurdle. And like I said, it's not a message I necessarily want to preach. In August, when I sat down and kind of created my next year's goals, the message I have to share with you today didn't make the top 5 list. It didn't make the top 10 list. It didn't make the top 100 list because my list didn't go that far. It didn't make the list. It just didn't. It's kind of a surprise to me. And part of the reason I don't want to share this message is because you know what it has to do with, don't you? Oh, see, you knew. You knew. It has to do with money. And as soon as I say money, some of you go, bye-bye. Some of you are gathering your stuff. I see you. You're gathering your stuff. And here's the deal. During synergy time, when you're eating the snacks, don't tell anybody second service what we're talking about. I'm serious. You can't do that. Some of you are going to shut down, you're going to stop listening, and you're ready to grab your stuff and leave. For some of you, you're going to go home and you're going to say, I told you, all they talk about church is money. I love that phrase. I love that phrase. So do you understand where I'm coming from? It's not really what I want to do. But I also want you to understand that as I've prayed, and as I've thought, and as I've talked, and as I've conversed with people and groups of people in our church, I've really come to realize that this conversation that we're going to have today is less about money and more about us being the church that God wants us to be. And I mean that. I mean, I think God wants us to realize that our future is bright. We've had every reason to close these doors, and He hasn't. He hasn't allowed that to happen, which means He sees something in us that maybe we don't see in us. Maybe He believes that our future is brighter than we realize. I think He wants us to make a big jump over this big hurdle. I think we've talked about being a family and being unified and making a difference, and God's kind of saying, really? Show me. We've talked a lot about leadership and people saying, man, our leaders need to lead and we want them to lead and all this kind of stuff. And there's kind of this opportunity where they are. And God said, really? They're leading. We've made hard decisions, had long conversations, exhausting conversations, conversations that I sometimes don't get because they're over my head. The challenge before us will develop trust. We'll be clear. It'll make us look to our future. It could be an incredible moment where it'll help us look to the future and not dwell on the past. Since we talk about being a family, the challenge before us is to be a family, to work together and not just talk about it. Now, don't check out. Don't check out. Let's jump this hurdle together. I want to bring up Tanny Staffinson, and Tanny, you can come on, make your way up here. I want to talk a moment about Tanny and who he is. He's one of our church leaders. He's an elder. And his function on our elder team is our church treasurer, which might be, outside of the worship pastor, the most controversial job description, the job responsibility. I mean, those are the two areas that get the most criticism, okay? They just do. The treasurer and the worship pastor. So Dave and Tanny are tight, all right? Because they share the wounds. They share what's going on there. Tanny leads our finance department as the church treasurer, as our elder. And Tanny has led the finance department really through some difficult times. He really, truly has. He has worked with a team to create a budget to help our church move forward. He has worked hard to reduce expenses by negotiating all of our church contracts, things from cell phones to copy machines to insurance to toilet paper. They've worked hard to reduce the expenses. He has worked hard to project our income so that we could have a working budget without saying, we don't have enough, we don't have enough, we don't have enough. Listen, I don't think we have enough, but we're meeting the budget. And it gives us a foundation to move forward. He has helped replenish our reserves and our checking account so that we're in good covenant and a good working relationship with our bank. And because of the work Tanny and the finance team has done, we do have an incredible relationship with our bank and our lenders. And I want you to keep that in mind as Tanny shares with us a little bit this morning. Because here's the deal. Our church has a need. Our church has a need. And you've heard this a little bit for a long time. But our church need is the roof. The roof. The roof? Roof. All right? Never mind. Give Tanny a nice warm welcome as he shares with us.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. And I want to be up here about as much as you do today, actually. Okay. But here we are, and it's the finance guy, so what are we talking about? Money. But it's actually about a need that we have. And we are talking about the roof. And so many great things happen here. And without our home, we can't do any of the things that Tom talked about. We can't make a difference without our home. And so this is something that we have to protect. And this is something that's been put in front of us. And we have to address it now. And it's kind of a big deal. I want to show you a few pictures.
Should be a picture there. Is there a picture there, Dan?
Okay. It's a low-budget production, okay? Okay. So we're trying to save money, Okay. Well, but what we have is we have a need on our roof. In the older section, that roof is almost 30 years old, and there's a number of sections that are failing. And not only have we got leaks, we've got dry rot, we've got some things that absolutely have to be dealt with. And I think the visual will kind of show you what we're up against. But what we've got going here is to do what needs to be done. It's going to cost us $80,000. And that's a lot of money, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, and it's covering a lot of area. And so that's what our need is. Frankly, we don't have that money to do the work. We don't have the ability to borrow the money, really. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make the necessary repairs so that we can go forward as a church. And, oh, here we go. So this is our home, but this is also our home. I want to show you this. Come on, Tom. Maybe not. There we go. Okay. It's a little light. That's the inside of our roof. That's the outside of the building. Okay. This usually works better than that. Okay. And I know quite a few of you have already seen this because we've been around to some groups and we've met with some ministry groups, so you guys have seen this in detail.
Tanny, I'm going with our first one.
Okay. So here we go. There we go. That's actually the inside of the building. And I think you can just imagine, the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. So it's something that we need to deal with, and we do need to deal with it now. That's actually the support truss that's rotted away. So as we said, it's going to cost us approximately $80,000. We feel very good about that number. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. Okay. We're going really fast here. Okay, and then there's something else that's come up too. Not only do we have a need, we have an opportunity. And along with a big home, what do you usually get? Big mortgage. And this place is really big and it's got a really big mortgage. And I think everybody knows that. And we're going to show you, I don't want everybody to choke because we're going to show you a couple of really big numbers here. You want to put that next one up, Tom? Okay. But this is an opportunity that we didn't know we were going to have. We refinanced, go back one, Tom. One more. If you remember, we refinanced the loan in April of 2012, and that saved us $6,400 a month. But here's the thing. This thing started at $3.6 million. Go ahead. And so far, we've paid $1.5 million, and $1.1 million of that's been interest. And something you just start thinking about is, what could we do with that? How many lives could we change? Or, even part of that money. And so a real interesting opportunity came up. And I just want to show you this. If our loan goes the way that it's scheduled now, we're going to pay $3.3 million in principal plus $2.5 million in interest. So here's what happens. We have an opportunity to pay down the principal on the mortgage without penalty. That window ends in another month. And if we don't do anything, our interest rate will go up 0.5%, which is going to increase our payments about $1,000 a month for at least the next 5 years. So that's going to take another $12,000 a year out of our budget. And what we found was we were in a good position with the bank, a lot better position than we were 2 years ago. And when we met with them, we said, you know, you got this interest rate increase. Since we're doing a good job, maybe you guys can just pony up and just make this thing go away. And we have an opportunity, if we are able to pay down, and this is a lot, $100,000 on our mortgage, the interest rate will not go up. So what that does is, if we paid $100,000 by April 15th, that's good, Tom. We would save $60,000 in increased payments. We would also save $235,000 in interest, so our total savings would be $300 and whatever thousand dollars. And so what that really means is, those are big numbers, but for every dollar someone contributes, it's $3.32. $3.32 for every dollar. And it's kind of like, you know, the only way you work on something that's $3 million is to just chip away at it when you can. But it's an opportunity that we didn't know we were going to have, and it's an opportunity that God put in front of us. And really, this has been His timing, and now we need to see what we can do with it. But it is an opportunity for us to not only fix our home, but to reduce debt and really make a difference going forward. Thanks, Tom. And, you know, this may or may not sound like a good thing to be part of, but it does have a positive impact. And whatever we do is above and beyond what we're doing now. And that's really important because our operating expenses aren't going to change. So if we say, you know what, I'm going to take my tithe money and I'm going to put it towards the building project because I think that's really a good idea, that's going to cause us some problems later. And we don't want to do that. And so this is above and beyond. This is asking for more from you. It's above and beyond what you're doing presently. And it's really important that we understand that. Because the other thing that we're going to do is, you know, we're going to be coming back in May with our pledge drive. And that's not us asking for more money. That's asking for you to tell us what's going on, what you're able to do. And what the pledge drive really has done for us over the past few years is it has allowed us to get where we're at financially. Your communication to us has allowed us to prepare an effective budget and be better stewards with the resources that we have. So we will be coming forward with that again later. But this is a short time frame. April 15th is right around the corner. And, you know, the quicker we know, the better. I'm talking to the bank kind of daily almost. So the more information I have, the better. It kind of helps with the whole negotiating process. So, you know, if this is something that you do feel you want to be a part of, just put that on your check or put it on the envelope, put building fund, I'll see it. And if it's something that you can do but you can't do today, maybe just put that on a communication card so we know that that's coming. That would be very helpful. And we'll be outside by the fireside room after service if you've got any questions that we can answer. With that, I just give it back to Tom, and thank you.
Well, the computer didn't want us to talk about it either. So I love when that happens. It's not the way we practice, but good job, Tanny. So we have a need. The need is our roof. It just is. $80,000. We have an opportunity with our mortgage, and that's $100,000. So our goal by April 15th is $180,000. And whew, there it is. See? Don't tell anybody second service what we're talking about, all right? Let me be real. The need is great, the opportunity is appealing, but the price is challenging. We have a short opportunity, the time frame is short. The economy hasn't recovered, I know that. There are plenty of other needs in our lives, things that we need to do, things that we need to cover. There could be a lot of questions, there could be a lot of concerns, and definitely when we talk about finances, we get criticism, and that's okay. But we want to be as forward, as honest, as open as we possibly can be, because we don't want you to have any doubts in the things that we're talking about and things we're trying to accomplish. I went to Bible college, not business banking Ozark Christian College, all right? And so I have learned more about banking and more about finances than I think I could have ever imagined learning. And yet through this entire process, I've been thinking, what is the story? I keep coming back to the same story over and over, the story where I feel like Jesus just really addresses this stuff. And that's where I want to pick up in John chapter 6. If you'll turn to your Bibles, in John chapter 6, and listen to this story. And figure out who you are in the story. Figure out what you connect with in this story. This is what it says. After this, and after this means there's a whole lot of stuff that happened before this, okay? So after this, Jesus was teaching and he was healing and he had crowds of people following him. And so this is what it's saying. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now, this is a pretty incredible story because Matthew talks about this same story, Mark talks about this same story, Luke talks about this same story, and so we read all of them. We call it the harmony of the Gospels. We read the whole story connected, and all of a sudden you can piece all the pieces together. And you have a complete picture. And so basically when Jesus and his disciples got into a boat and they pushed away from the land, the crowd sat there and they watched where he was going. They saw what direction they were headed, and they ran around the lake. Some of them even beat Jesus there. And so as soon as Jesus and his disciples pull up to shore where they think they're going to get a little rest, a little recuperation, a little distance from the crowds of people, who's there? The crowd of people. And Jesus, I imagine, looks up and he sees this crowd, and literally as this crowd ran around to the other side of the lake, Jesus is tired, he's hungry, he needs rest. And yet we see Jesus moved not by his own needs, but by the needs he sees in the crowd. He's moved by people. He loves people. Jesus is moved by their need for teaching, by the sickness, by their need for healing. Jesus is moved by their need for food. And he's moved by their desire to follow him. To follow him. And so verse 4 says this. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. And it's important to know that this is Jesus' second Passover. So it's really the initiation of his last year of ministry. And as he begins this last year of ministry, what's the next Passover going to bring? His death, his burial, and his resurrection. Verse 5, lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, could you imagine? Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon's Peter's brother, said to him, "Hey, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many people?" And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their full, he told his disciples, "Hey, gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that had been done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." And perceiving then that they were able to come and take him by force to make him king. And so Jesus withdrew to get that R&R, to be by himself, to be there. And this is Jesus' second Passover, and knowing the Passover is near explains why there's such a large amount of people. There's so many people around, and Jesus took, and he saw these large crowds, and he decided to do something. So he took them up to this hillside, probably a grassy field not near Bethsaida Julius, would have been the small town near the Sea of Tiberias. And we know that there are 5,000 men, but what's really interesting about this is that many commentators speculate that there were nearly 15,000 people. The men are counted, the women and the children are not. There is likely 15,000 people here. And I get to verse 5, and all of a sudden I wonder, why Philip? Why Philip? Here he is, and Jesus says, "Hey, Philip, how are we going to feed all these people?" And Philip all of a sudden starts calculating, he starts thinking. I'm sure Judas Iscariot, the treasurer, was nearby going, "Well, I don't think we have enough." And all of a sudden, you see how this verse comes to life. What is Jesus trying to teach Philip while he sits there and teaches the crowds? You see, Jesus asks Philip the most fascinating question. He says, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" And Philip is left to ponder the question. He's left to think about the question. And it appears that Jesus isn't so concerned about Philip's answer. Don't miss that. He's not concerned so much about Philip's answer. Jesus is more concerned about Philip's response. It's probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The crowd and Jesus and his disciples are in this remote area, too far for anybody to run and grab a few loaves of bread. I mean, where are you going to get enough bread to feed 15,000 people anyway? And Jesus tells the disciples, he says, "You feed the crowd." Feed the crowd, he says. You can almost see the disciples getting nervous, twiddling their fingers, wondering who's going to be the first one to talk. Probably Peter, because he was the big mouth. But Peter's silent in this story. I mean, if they had that much money, which they likely didn't have that much money, would they have time? Where would they get the food? And so a few of them look through the crowd. They walk through and they look through the crowd. Andrew finds a little boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now the loaves of bread they're not quite like our loaves of bread. They're flat, they're round, they're probably about 4 inches in diameter. They're barley loaves, which would be food that the poor ate, but not necessarily poor food, if that makes sense. The fish would be likened to our canned sardines. Because the fish weren't much. The fish were probably either pickled and used kind of as a relish to put on the bread, to give a little protein, to give a little flavor, to give the bread a little something. And so we're talking a few loaves of bread, 5 that are probably 4 inches in diameter, and a couple of wee little fish, just to make some flavor. And Andrew brings the boy to Jesus. And the boy brings his bread and he brings his fish to Jesus. And I'm sure the disciples were thinking, "Hey, we still need to run to town and get some more food, right?" But Jesus divides the crowd of people into groups of 50s and 100s. And Jesus looked into heaven and he said, "Father, bless this. Multiply this. Use this to feed the people in this crowd." He gave thanks for the meal, and the crowd ate until they had enough to eat. They ate until they were full, and then the disciples were able to take 12 baskets and fill these baskets with leftovers. I think Jesus did that to remind the disciples of their responsibility. Take that basket and feed my people. Take my basket of food, my leftovers, and you feed more people. Do you see why this miracle resonates so much with this radical ask of $180,000? We have a need, we have an opportunity, and I believe that we are supposed to work together. We're to unify our efforts to meet the need and to make most of the opportunity. I believe that our future is brighter than our past. And this would be the question that I would ask you this morning. Where are you in the story? Which character are you in the story? Are you Philip? Are you sitting back wondering, how in the world are we ever going to accomplish this? Tom, do you have any idea what you're asking? In a matter of about, 29 days? Do you get what you're asking? Well, don't you think Philip said, Jesus, what are you asking me? What are you asking me to do here? Don't you see there's 5,000 men? How in the world could I ever get enough bread? Are you worried about how it will affect you? Are you worried about how you'll come up with something to bring? Could it be that Jesus is less concerned about the answer and he's more concerned with the response? Are you in the crowd? Are you hungry? Are you sitting here? Because this is what happens with the crowd. If you've checked out, you're the crowd, and listen, the crowd scares me. Because when Jesus starts teaching the hard things to this crowd, do you know what starts happening? They're full, they've been fed, but they start to leave. He starts teaching them that he's the bread of life. He's the bread of life. And he teaches this lesson, and they get uncomfortable. They don't like it very much, and so they begin to leave. So many of them left that Jesus turns to his disciples, and he says, are you going to leave me too? So I went to the staff on Tuesday and said, I'm scared. Are you going to leave me too? But I can tell you with assurance that our leaders are bought in. Our staff is bought in. I can't stand up here and say to you to do something that we're not willing to do. Bill Hybels says if you want your people to bleed, you've got to hemorrhage. Are you the crowd? Are you Andrew? Are you going to think about how you can be a part of the solution? Are you looking for the food? Are you looking for someone in the crowd to help? Listen, if this was our miracle, if this was our miracle, and we were asking Jesus to be Jesus in our miracle, I want all of us to be the little boy who says, I don't know how much I have, but what I have I will bring. I will bring what I can have. Listen, we're not doing this as a traditional church fundraiser would be done, where we say, well, we need so many people to give this much and so many people to give this much, and really if you give this much, then you're number one on the chart. We're not doing that because that would presume that we all know where you're at. What I do know is all of us are able and all of us are capable of bringing something just like the little boy. Just like the little boy. And we get to bring that to Jesus, and Jesus has the opportunity to multiply it. We know for a fact that every dollar will be worth $3.32. That's a multiplication in itself. Who knows the spiritual implications that are involved in this? Who knows what power of the Spirit God is going to unleash in our church in the next 5 years to see what we can accomplish and do. It's been frustrating to me because none of the Gospels tell how Jesus did it. When I've gone to magic shows, I always want to go to YouTube and try to figure out how'd they do it. So I searched. I think I read all 4 Gospels in the last week trying to figure out have I missed something over the years? How did Jesus do this? How did he do it? Yet the reason we have this miracle is recorded is because we need to know that Jesus has the power to multiply. We need to see that Jesus has the power to multiply barley loaves and fish. He did it with wine, and he did it with fish. He told Peter, throw the net on the other side. And Peter said, what are you talking about? You're not even a fisherman. And he did it, and there were so many fish that the boat started to sink. Can he do it with our money? Can he do it with our money? My question is this: will you be like the boy? Will you let Jesus do what Jesus can do? Will you ask Jesus to help us let go of what the world treasures most? Will we work together with our leadership, our elders, and our staff in our church? Can we work together to meet this opportunity, knowing that we have a pledge drive in the future, knowing that this is above and beyond our regular gifts, because we can't have our operations dip. We can't do that. Maybe you're given for the very first time, potentially. Could you be encouraged that every dollar is worth more than your dollar? We will celebrate. May 4th is our annual business meeting. We will celebrate what he did. At this point, it's not about me, and it's not about Tanny, it's not about our elders. It's really not even about you. It's about him. And we will celebrate what he's able to do. Will you pray about what you can bring to Jesus? Will you be like the little boy who says, you might feed a few, but here it is.